Hello guys, I have a new chart to share with you for any of you who care about the truth or care about freedom in this world. Well, here's a criterion so you can see where people fall among the spectrum of freedom lovers. And it doesn't have to do with a political spectrum at all. In fact, it's its own political spectrum. It has to do with morality, it has to do with an individual's own conscience, the real things that matter that we deal with on an everyday basis, how people go about their lives, what actions they take. This deals with all of that because this is what amounts to an individual's mentality to their own belief system and what they currently stand on as their reasoning behind why they do what they do. And we need to be able to look deeper. So this graph I'm going to show you is all about that. So I'm going to put myself in the corner here. You can take a screenshot of this if you'd like. Okay, feel free at any time. Take a screenshot of this. This is the chart that I made called the Statist Criterion. Now, you may not know what the word statist means. I'm going to put some questions on the screen for you. Okay, think over these questions. You can pause the video if you want. All right, and it's going to go away. So now we can just look at this chart. Okay, and if you want to go back to those questions or you want even more questions, you can, of course, go back in the video or go to deliberator.us as it says in the chart. There's tons of resources there. Now, when it says statist, this is something that you may have not heard of as a term, and you come to recognize that by doing the shadow work, this green arrow that's moving right. This green arrow that's moving right is what we're mainly going to follow here. So we're going to start on the very left of this diagram. Okay, again, has nothing to do with left versus right, nothing to do with politics, has to do with an individual, their own decision making, and it ties into politics, but it isn't politics. Okay, so the left side of this chart. Okay, contradictive morality / acts, violates golden rule and twists basic morality. So these are morality that people have in their own head or actions that they take that violates the golden rule, twists basic morality. For instance, an individual may say, yeah, theft is wrong. But when confronted, they say, well, theft is okay if it's done in the name of taxation. Okay, so now they're making a contradiction in morality because if I then ask them, well, would you take your neighbor's money? They say no. Okay, so it needs to be done by some authority figures. It needs to be done by some people with a badge or uniform. That contradicts their morality. Now, they could admit to it, and if they admit to it, then we move along the spectrum here, okay? If they don't admit to it, there's probably these other things that are underlying it, but they're not going to be able to face it unless they get past this first barrier. So this is all barriers that people have to go through recognizing in their life if they are a statist, to recognize they are a statist into becoming what is seemingly extreme an anarchist, a free, sovereign human being. Now, this video can be pretty long if I go into detail with everything, so I'm not going to do that. I think the chart can explain itself for the most part, so I'm just going to be reading over this for the most part, okay? I have many presentations and videos on specific topics and specific perspectives. Of course, many different perspectives leading to the same truths. All right, so if we look at the second little boundary we have to get past here, well, what do people do? If they're not contradictive in their morality or actions or with it, they're going to make ends justifies means statements. Okay, now this is also known as utilitarianism in philosophy, and many people make these statements, and here are just some. Well, what will stop me or someone from doing this or that? It'll just happen again. What about other countries? Why don't you leave? Go to another country. Well, violence is necessary. Well, wouldn't warlords or gangs take over? It would be chaos. It's impossible. How will blank get done? Somebody needs to lead. People are not capable. It has always existed. There's nothing we can do. And then there's a bunch of other assumptions, of course, that people will make without genuine questions. So if somebody's asking the question genuinely, great, but for everybody that I've talked to within my own life who falls under the statist criterion, they make these assumptions. They don't ask them as genuine questions. They just say them because they want to say, well, what about this? It's sort of sometimes coming out very instinctually because they're trained into believing, well, if you don't have government, you're going to not have roads, for instance. So the first thing they ask is, well, what about the roads? And then, okay, well, what about something else? Or what about this? What about that? And they're just going to start throwing a bunch of things, and it can also distract from the direct causation, which is, well, okay, if you want that done, how is it done? and they never want to trace it back to violence. They may not even want to admit it's violence. Okay, so this is, again, from my personal experience talking with these individuals, but you're also going to have this experience yourself if you understand this information, which the people who are in this mentality will not understand this information unless they look through it, which means going through all these boundaries. So you might be watching right now, totally new to this concept, not understanding what I'm saying, or saying, well, some of these statements seem pretty legit. In that case, you have no clue. You're on the left side of this chart. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But then moving forward, if you want to learn, if you want to discuss, if you want to reason and have logic and think things through, you're going to keep moving to the right of this chart. Okay, so that's why the third little boundary here is avoiding discussion. It's very easy for somebody to say, well, I don't want to face morality. I don't want to admit it's violence that makes these things get done, that I think violence is necessary. So I have to avoid the discussion. Maybe I get angry, I get flustered. I have to throw in God. I have to throw in other things to try to bring it into a direction where I feel more comfortable, because they feel uncomfortable facing certain truths about themselves and their own belief system. Okay, so this happens naturally. Anytime people disagree with something, it's called cognitive dissonance in psychology. Okay, and you saw this especially with the Stanley Milgram experiment, which is a banned psychological experiment where people had a hard time facing their own responsibility, a hard time facing the truth that they were responsible for their own actions or their own belief systems, or that they have to confront their own morality, because it's so much easier to just follow orders or just say, well, the authority will take care of it, or government will do this and that, without actually thinking through, could it be done peacefully? Could it be done without violence? Could I be responsible for my life? And these are all the questions that you would ask, again, if you want to move more to the right of this chart. Okay, so then we have disregarding education, or basically, if you've never seen or read any voluntarist material, this could include works from Larkin Rose, Mark Passio, Murray Rothbard, many of the anarcho-capitalists. It can be even people who just talk about anarchy all through history, Emma Goldman, and maybe the abolitionists who ended slavery. It could be William Lloyd Garrison, it could be Aidan Ballou, it can be Henry Clark Wright. It can be all sorts of different people, depending on who you look at. Lysander Spooner, definitely a great individual to look into if you're new to this information. Breaks it down really simple through many different perspectives. If you're somebody who really holds on to the Constitution, says we gotta follow the Constitution, well, read Lysander Spooner, No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority, and come back to me. See what your thoughts are. Get this discussion going, unless, of course, you want to avoid discussion, but then again, you're staying on this left side of the chart, not willing to explore this other potential, this journey that you could be going through for knowledge. Okay, people at some point in time to say, I don't want to look into it, so they basically want to be ignorant. They want to be distracted, and they don't want to have discernment. That's why this red arrow pointing to the left just keeps pushing people into their contradictive acts and morality. They see it's okay. They see it's normal for life to just live in contradiction, because that's all there ever is in their life, and they say, oh, well, everyone's doing it anyways, and there's no possible reality without it. So, let me introduce you that possible reality. And so we'll get there. If we see what's next here, it's not knowing what statism is. Many people talk about freedom or politics, barely even mention statism. And when people do, they might look it up online. It just says like political control, but statism is actually just the belief in authority. So is there authority vested in certain human beings, meaning they have the right to rule? Now, meaning right to rule is not the same thing as leadership. Like if somebody you want to follow voluntarily on your own behalf, like, hey, I want to follow this guy, he does a lot of great stuff. Okay, that's leadership, right? He's somebody worth emulating. Somebody it's like, yeah, he's inspiring. He's helping us in our own lives. He's empowering us, we the people. But if you say they're authority, that means they get to do certain things that other people don't. They have the special right to rule. Now they have rights that other people don't have. It's not leadership. People are going to obey them just because they're an authority figure, not because they're a leader. A leader is someone you look up to, you voluntarily participate, but you can say, well, I don't really like this leader anymore, I'm not going to follow him. In the case of authority, it's like you must obey, he's authority. If you go against authority, you're a criminal, you're illegal. This is the authority mindset, and this is the statist mindset ultimately. But people don't know enough about this mindset. It's best explored in the book The Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose. So it's a superstition, meaning it's a belief system. Most people treat it like a religion. They have certain rituals and ceremonies that they partake in with government, voting in elections, right? Very common. But also other things like worshiping a flag, worshiping idols as if they're gods, and praying or basically begging for permission to be free. So acting literally as if they are gods. Of course, I wrote books about this as well in relation to nature or God, however perspective you want to see it. Now, among this line, if you think, you haven't looked into the information, you don't know about statism, you might just straight up be like, yeah, we should obey. We should ignore morality. We should just do what we're told. We should just do what authority says for us to do. So it's obeying. Okay, so getting past that boundary is then realizing, wait, I might be following trends. I might just be doing things because other people are doing it. So this includes voting and includes using certain terminology like this law, this constitution, this system, democracy, conservative. Like it's just a bunch of isms, ologies, illusions, things that are made up, most things that are just indoctrinated, and people feel like it's a sports game, a theater game. They have to use fancy terms, make themselves sound smart, to make themselves have some sort of purpose in life, but none of it is really actually substantial or real in any sense. And it can also include just following the experts or the mainstream narratives, whatever's pumped out on the TV, one side or another. They're not following their own heart, and they're not following their own mind. So they are following other people. Of course, if they're willing to obey, that's a great sign too. And this all stems back to indoctrination, which can also be called mind control. And of course, the CIA and MK Ultra, this is all public. They did mind control on individuals. See what those victims talked about. See what those survivors of MK Ultra talked about their mind and how they were mind controlled by the CIA. I mean, this is not hidden information, but how mind control works, it can happen in mass scale as well. And the worst part about mind control is people don't realize they're being mind controlled. That's what makes it mind control. So people can do that themselves. They can bring it to their own children. It could be generational to the point where no one realizes that they're upholding an illusion for so long, or something that can actually be so unsustainable and destructive to humankind. That's how dangerous this belief system is. And so once you recognize all these criterions, you realize that you were a statist. You start understanding what this term really means. You realize it's an extreme position and an immoral position. It's not one that you should uphold. So that's why it's in quotes, the word statist, because you recognize, wait, I'm actually a human being. I'm not a statist anymore. But now you might ask the question, well, what am I? And this is where we start moving toward the right side of this chart. Okay, because once you're saying, okay, I'm not a statist anymore. I understand what statism is. It's extreme position. I'm not that extreme. I want to freely think. I want to be responsible. Well, now we're moving up in the world. And now we're getting past those boundaries. We did some shadow work to recognize who we are. We asked some questions. We used a Socratic method, what Larkin Rose also calls candles in the dark method. Okay, maybe we applied Mark Passio's natural law teachings. These are all just different methods, right, that people have used to get to the same truths. And so we're becoming a free thinker. We become self-responsible. That's the second one. Third, we start to understand, we should do what's right. And since we're doing what's right, morality is always above authority, right? We should always do what's right. Doesn't matter if the law tells us to do something. Your property is your property. Theft is never right. Violence is never right. Okay. And so what statism is because of this. You're able to see that there's a contradiction perhaps in authority. As you did the shadow work before to see this, you now know what statism is in its totality, and you've even battled it yourself. And so you regard education, and you might even encourage education to others. And you can gladly admit that you've seen and read voluntarist material, even if it's your own at this point in time. And it could be your own journal, it could be on your own thoughts. I mean, really, you voluntarily took the time to look at a voluntary world. This is what you did. And that's what voluntarist means, is that you just want a voluntary free world, a world that is based on voluntary interaction, not violence. Of course, if you want a world not based on voluntary interaction, you want a world based on violence, which is government, because every law is backed by violence. That's how every single one gets carried out. And so you encourage discussion. Now that you've seen, read, you've experienced, you've looked at the other side of things, you want to talk about things, you want to ask questions, and those questions are going to get you in trouble. Those questions not everybody's going to like, but it's questions that can be very helpful nonetheless. Okay, and so you're always going to see evil as evil. You're not going to make any justifications. You're not going to make any excuses. And therefore, your acts, what you speak, what you say, what you do, everything, maybe even what you eat, it's all going to become principled. You're going to realize morality is important, or the truth as a whole is important, and it must be upheld no matter what. And that essentially morality or truth is your only authority, or God, or nature, and that man being authority, there's no such thing, right? Man can guide each other, they can help each other, but voluntarily, if they use violence, then they're taking the place. They're saying that they're required for truth, they're required for morality. They're not. You decide your own fate, you live your own life, and you have to let other people live their own life. And so, as contradictory as this might sound, you become an anarchist. Anarchist, if you break it down, anarchon means no rulers, doesn't mean no rules. Okay, that's all it means in Greek. Literally, that's all it means. People assume it means chaos, so they assume it's extreme. That's why it's in quotes. But really, anarchism is just like you recognize everybody's a human being, you're a human being. And the better word for this, in case you want to use something better, might be abolitionists. That's what I call myself, since the abolitionists, a lot of them were also anarchists, or they held a lot of no governmentist positions. Or just can call yourself sovereign. Superreign means above ruler, so you rule yourself. Internal or internal monarch means you're the one ruler of yourself, right? It's another term. External anarchist means you want freedom for everybody, but internal monarchist means you rule yourself. There's many ways to say this, right? There's never one way, but voluntarist is always usually the better term to use, since it's now become pretty universally applicable for this information to realize, wait, I want a world based on consent and consensual interaction, which most people live by in their everyday life. They only give an exception to that in politics. So that's where it becomes problematic. And so that's the chart in a nutshell. I basically just went over everything. And if you're new to this information, I can expect it to seem contradictory at times, or confusing, or like, man, maybe I need to learn more. If you have the mindset of you need to learn more, awesome. Because just like any student going into new information, you have to be willing to learn, and it doesn't mean you have to agree. In fact, you absolutely can disagree. The point is that what I believe in the ideas that I hold, I'm never going to impose on you with violence. Whereas those who uphold government or the state, they will impose their views on you with violence. So you can say it's contradictory all you want, but they're the ones in contradiction. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just telling you to open your eyes, open your hearts to fellow humankind. It's really simple, right? And so anarchy is just reality. It's just nature. It just is life. And it's a reality that there's always going to be wrong people, evil people. But the thing is, you don't have to give them power. And that's where statism comes in. Once you believe in statism, this religion essentially, you're saying, well, evil can continue. And that's how it grows. That's how it turns into tyranny. That's how it turns into democide, the top cause of unnatural death. That's why the death caused by government is actually way more than that done privately by individuals. And you can still have police. You can still have all sorts of services. In fact, you'd have more if we lived in a truly free world, because people would be obligated to be responsible. In addition, that's how you get there. So if somebody says, well, how do you achieve anarchism? Well, it's through education. It's through this right side of things. It's through the shadow work, the recognition, the Socratic method, and using that in conversation with others. It might make them feel uncomfortable at times, but that's how you plant the seed. You get them thinking, then other people do the same thing, and other people do the same thing, and you start pressing on it a little bit more. And it naturally gravitates you. You keep your calm. You work with people like a coach. You're just asking questions. You're not, attacking them. You're not yelling at them. You're just asking questions. That's all you're doing. And that can work wonders, right? So that's all it means. You know, if you want to achieve anarchy, it actually requires rules. So whereas the ruler becomes the rules in the case of statism, anarchy includes no rulers, just rules. And the rules are essentially the rulers then, or like you could say God or nature, like I said, is the only ruler. If you want to personate it. But essentially, it's upholding morality and not giving morality an exception. So for people to say it's just chaos when what's required for it is literally order is quite funny. Not to mention that most people engage voluntarily, like I said, in an everyday basis, and most people know violence is wrong, and they're not just going to commit it for no reason. Right. And I think being able to see that and why people commit violence and not make such quick assumptions of people you don't know, and to have some sense of sympathy for your fellow man is a great thing. So quick we wanted to say, well, just throw them in a jail, so just do this, like apply this one punishment on all of these criminals. There's so many methods that we can use to help people, and it doesn't have to be limited to the state way of being ran. All these policemen, all these people working for the government are being paid by taxes, so that's money being stolen from us. So even if it helps us with potential crime, there's a crime being guaranteed. And so you're using guaranteed crime to prevent possible crime. Doesn't make any sense. Again, another contradiction. So you start running through all these different mental loops and you realize it's contradictory everywhere and it's causing more harm than good. And government never in the history of the world ever protected the rights of individuals. It has always done the opposite. This is a new realization for humanity, just as much as 200 years ago, it was a new realization that slavery is wrong. And the abolitionists faced a whole world of people who disagreed, who said slavery is natural and necessary, and without slaves, who will pick the cotton? The same exact arguments, the same exact end justifying the means statements. And that's why the abolitionists started to see these other forms of slavery, which we're only starting to see now. Okay, so there's an evolution for humanity constantly heading toward morality if we're willing to do so. And if we refuse to do so, guess what? World War II will happen again. Mark my words, absolutely guaranteed. Another war, another collapse, 100%. The only way you prevent it is you get rid of this mentality. That's it. Otherwise, you can slow it, you can make it faster, but it's inevitable. Because as long as you have that mentality, you can limit government, but if you're still legitimizing government or authority, it's gonna grow. If you still legitimize any violence, violence is going to continue to grow. Whereas if you stand on the principled position, you say all violence is wrong, you should always follow your conscience, always do what is right, don't just follow orders or do what is told of you to do. That is true education, that's leadership, that's encouraging it in other individuals as well. That is nature's authority. You know, that's God's authority. I mean, that's how life is ran in reality, you know, not with illusion. So thank you very much for watching. I hope I made this easier for you guys. And with this chart, feel free to share it around, share this video around, if you will, and learn more at theliberator.us, theliberator.us. My name is Cory, Edmund Endrulat. Thank you very much for watching.